So that brings me on to the topic of, if we talk about faith stages, because I think you know about those, don't you?
Fowler's stages of faith, are we talking?
Stages of faith. Yeah, I studied them years ago, and as I remember it, you know, people start off with this guy James Fowler looked at stages of faith, and he made it a bit linear, and then there's different versions of it. But there are processes that you go through, and you have to go through a process of maturation as you get older, that it's normal to have a faith that is given to you. Then you have to it all has to sort of fall apart, and you realize I only believe what I believe because it was given to me by my parents or where I live. And then you discover your own faith, and that actually pain and suffering are intrinsic to and vital to growing in your faith and having your own faith. That's what I remember of Fowler. What
I remember it slightly differently. Oh no! Yeah, I would no. The version or what I think of when I think of Fowler's stages of faith is I can't remember how many there are. I think there's 6, but he talks about originally our faith is very simplistic. It's good and bad, black and white. It's the kind of faith that a child has. All the stories in the Bible are 100% literally true. Goodies and baddies. The goodies wear white hats, the baddies wear black hats, and the goodies always win. Then as we begin to mature, we begin to integrate those sort of very simplistic stories into a more sort of, we think more in terms of like storytelling and meaning and that kind of stuff within the stories. And then we get to stage 3, I think it is. Someone who knows more than this will probably, someone's Googling it right now and finding out I know nothing.
I think it's 3 as well. We'll see if anyone notices.
Where faith becomes a list of rules and regulations. So to be a good Christian, don't drink, don't swear, don't smoke, don't sleep around. Tick all the boxes, well done, you're a good boy. And so it becomes a list of rules, and it can become quite legalistic and religious, that kind of thing. Now, the problem is that many churches stop there, because the next stage is when you realise that actually there's life outside the boxes. I've been living in a box, and there is security in a box, remember. You know, if people know the rules, they know what they need to do, they know what makes them in and what makes them out. We all have a deep sense of wanting to belong somewhere, be part of something. So if the rules of the club are that I have to do certain things, I do those things, and then I'm a good member and people love me and accept me and I belong. So there is a real benefit in being in a box. And of course, from a pastor's point of view, I assume having a church full of people who know the rules and obey the rules is every pastor's dream, isn't it, really?
I couldn't possibly comment.
Yeah. But then the next stage is when you sort of kick down the walls of the box and realise that there's something much bigger than that, and then to step out into that and to mature into that. Although, of course, the people who are still in the box think you're backsliding because you're not obeying the rules anymore. So there's always that kind of tension. And it's similar to the way that people grow up, I think, just as human beings. When my boys were young, we taught them don't play with matches, don't run in the road, stop kicking your brother, all those kind of rules. And then as they grow up, they begin to question the rules and challenge the rules. And, you know, why should I? Why should I go to bed now? Why should I wash my hands before meals? Why should I? And then during their teenage years, they're questioning and they've chucked off all the rules, and they're finding their own meaning and purpose and how do I live and what do I do? And the hope is obviously as adults, they come back to some semblance of faith or morality, or you know, have something that we've tried to put into them as parents that they've held on to, but they have to own that for themselves. They have to own it for themselves. And part of that, like you say, is that process of maturation through all the other things. Which reminds me, we were talking on Monday, I know, about helicopter parents. I'm probably off on a tangent, but let me just talk this. So when my boys were younger, we lived near the beach. So we wanted them to enjoy the beach, enjoy the sea, but you have that fear, what if they drown, obviously. So the two choices are, you can either keep them out of the water, or you can teach them how to swim. And if you decide I'm going to keep them out of the water, that just means for the rest of your life, you've got to make sure they just don't go near any body of water, or they might drown. But in the process of teaching people how to swim, often, we've all done it, you go under a bit too long, you come up spluttering and gasping and all that kind of stuff, don't you? That's what happens. And it is that thing that if our kids get to 18, say, and then go off into the big wide world, but they've never experienced grief or loss or disappointment or confusion or sadness or any kind of negative thing. And as parents, we want to protect our kids from that. Of course we do. Of course we do. But if we don't expose them to that in a safe environment where it can be handled and, and can be dealt with in a healthy way, and we teach them how to deal with sadness, how to deal with disappointments, how to deal with frustration, those kind of things. If they don't learn those skills, then they reach 18 and they're not really equipped for life, I don't think. And I think that's the difficulty. And I think spiritually, it's that same thing. Are we, either by choice or by accident or by design or whatever, are we producing, Christians who have been helicopter parented by pastors who want to protect their flock from all the bad things in the world, with a good heart, I'm sure, or is it better to to have to face these things and deal with them, because eventually we're going to have to deal with them anyway, like you say. It's just whether or not we have that internal resilience, whether we've got the ability within ourselves to withstand all the things that life throws at us.
Yeah, because I've always thought with Fowler, when I encountered him years ago, that what we do is we Christians double down on this process and bundle in certitude and guarantees, and then what happens is life happens to you and you go, but I played by the rules, I behaved, I was told everything was going to be okay, and it's not. And then everything implodes, life implodes, faith implodes, and it's quite catastrophic. In fact, there's research, the academic part of me that does research on church and culture and stuff. Evangelical Christians are prone to a double whammy, their kids, because helicopter parenting and snowplow parents, that's another phrase I heard the other week, parents going in front of them and protecting them from everything. That's happening to all kids in the West a lot. And then Christians come along with a spirituality of, don't worry, God will keep you happy, he'll sort everything out, nothing bad will happen to you. And that gets multiplied in even more. That's what's going on at the minute for another generation. And there's a thing called therapeutic moralistic deism. Have you come across that?
Oh, yeah. I'm going to say no, but as you talk about it, I might recognize.
You know what? Well, it'd be blindingly obvious to you. So basically, a bunch of researchers found out, surveying young adults a while ago, last 10 years or so, that what that leads to is a worldview, a way of seeing the world, where young people in particular, what faith gets reduced to therapy. God's there to make you feel better. Deism is God made the world and he's absent. He only intervenes in a crisis. So you don't really have to worry about him unless you need something. And the moralism, you've already touched on this, don't take drugs, don't kill anyone, and don't have sex before marriage. And that's really what is formed and made worse especially for young people in our culture. And that's a pretty anemic version of faith in God.
It is, of course. Yeah, exactly. But again, in a consumer society, is that not more attractive if you want people to buy your product? That's the difficulty, isn't it? And interestingly enough, you touch on something else. That feeling that people have earned. They need to earn their thing. I've been to church. I tithe. I read my Bible every day. I say my prayers. Therefore, God owes me. And when God says, "No, I don't," then what do we do with that? And these are difficult things. We all have to wrestle with them. I'm not belittling how difficult these things are. It is a very difficult situation to be in. But I think there are, it is an issue. And I think many pastors and church leaders, and you can read books and articles and stuff on the subject. It's been a question for a long time. How do we do it? And I think it's that difference between. I've got a friend who's constantly talking about there's a difference between numbers in church and discipleship. Jesus didn't say plant churches. He didn't say make Christians. He said make disciples. And that whole discipling process, what that is, how that works, the cost of discipleship, all that kind of stuff. We all struggle with it. We were talking last night actually in our small group about the parable of the sower. The 4 different seeds, types of soil. What if that field that the sower was sowing in is me? Just I'm all 4 of those things, and the gospel falls on 4 different areas in my own heart. Some of it falls on where I'm very receptive to the gospel and I absolutely love it. But there's other parts of the gospel that fall on a very hard heart, like take up my cross and forgive my enemies. Why would I do that? Other parts of the gospel fall on part of my heart that's initially enthusiastic, but then gets choked off by cares and worries and all this kind of stuff. And we were looking at it and just having a time where we were just kind of sharing where we were at and how that works. So I think we're all, we're all in a process, aren't we? Progress, not perfection. We're all doing the best we can. We're all learning. But I do think it's at teachable moments like this with the pandemic where people can, pause, reflect. How does my understanding of God inform this? How does this inform my understanding of God? And to do that kind of work of, of questioning and discussion and debate. But again, you mentioned certitude, that whole thing that in churches where we read the Bible like this and that's the answer, that's all there is to it, we're right and anyone who disagrees with us is wrong, then there is no room for questioning, there's no room for bend, there's no room for discussion, debate and doubting things and all those kind of things. And I think that's one of the things I like about Vineyard, is it's got quite a broad theology, it's accepting of different people who believe different things, within reason obviously, but there isn't that kind of hard line, what we teach, and if you don't like it, heave ho.